The children have been learning at Holiday Bible Club, and we're just going to go through these to spend 15 or so minutes looking at those and see what it means for us. Because, yes, they're relevant to the children, but they're also relevant to adults. Now, the culture we live in today loves heroic acts, loves rescue stories. And don't know about you, but I love sitting down watching a movie, a fictional movie with rescues and superheroes. Some of you will love tucking into fictional novels and books about rescues and great heroic acts. And maybe you've read some biographies or seen films that are based on real, true events. And those are really, really compelling because you sort of think, well, these were based on true events in the past that happened. This was real. And so it really moves us, doesn't it, when we hear of those and read those and see those. And I start here because we're going to be just here exploring this afternoon the greatest rescue mission in the history of the world that's recorded in the Bible, that's in God's word to us, and just go through the events in Egypt and what they mean, how they point to Jesus and what it means for us today. And Christians, you'll be very familiar with these truths. So for you, it's just going to serve as a reminder and an encouragement and a challenge. But if you're here and you're not used to church or Christian things, and you don't have the same faith as us, I'm going to share with you why this rescue is so extraordinary and challenge you to consider. So the first truth, just for us to acknowledge, is that God cares for us. God showed that he cared for the Israelites in what he did. This is what it says in Exodus 3, 7-8. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land. Now we know there's something not quite right with the world we live in. Problems of brokenness and suffering, wrongdoing and death, they confront us all around. We long, right, for a better future. We look back and we think, wow. We grieve and mourn of how life could have been and if it had been better. And we long for deliverance, a way out. See, the Israelites, they were under slavery in Egypt to Pharaoh. And it shows us that we were enslaved to something far bigger, far greater, far deeper. That is sin. We heard, isn't it, earlier what that means. It is our personal rebellion before God, a rejection of his rule as our creator and maker. It's the heart desire to live our own way rather than his way. And it is the reason why the world is the way it is. Those things I was saying earlier, brokenness, suffering, disease, death, destruction, division, out there because of the problem in here. And just as God cared enough for the Israelites that he sent Moses to accomplish his rescue plan, so God cared enough for us to send Jesus into the world to accomplish a rescue plan for us. Not to save us from being captive in Egypt, but from sin. It is the heart of the Christian message. It's why the Christian message is such good news. And so the question is this: have we recognized how much we need God? Every breath is from him. Life is a gift from him. And perhaps you don't think you're in need of rescuing. You think, I'm okay. And I can personally testify that before I was a Christian, I had no idea that I needed rescuing. I had no idea that there was something wrong with the relationship between myself and God until a Christian very kindly, very lovingly, very patiently got alongside me and shared the Christian faith. Perhaps you're here and you are really longing for deliverance. You've just had it. You've experienced things in this world, and you've tried to find a way out, a way to find sort of meaning, or try to find peace, and you haven't. Well, keep listening, because I want to show you that Jesus is the deliverer for you. And for Christians here, this is familiar truths up here, so we can't we, just lose the awe and the wonder of God and how much he cares for us. And what's astonished me this week is this. I mean, we sang the song, isn't it? God knows. And God does know. And here's the great thing. He knew, even before he'd created, even before he'd made me and you, that as he looked into the future, they're going to mess up. They're going to screw up. They're going to hurt me. They're going to rebel. Yet, knowing that, he still created. And not only that, God the Father and God the Son, they made a plan, a rescue plan, to send Jesus into the world on a rescue mission. I think about that and I look at that and I think, wow. Christians here, think about the awe and the wonder and the mystery of that. But it brings me to my second truth, to acknowledge that God has power over everything. We know that Pharaoh really, he did not want to let them go. And something miraculous, extraordinary, was going to need to happen to change his mind, because he wasn't listening. And so the Lord said this, Exodus 7, 3-5. But I'll harden Pharaoh's heart. And though I multiply my signs and wonders in Egypt, he will not listen to you. Then I will lay my hand on Egypt, and with mighty acts of judgment, I'll bring out my divisions, my people, the Israelites. And the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. And I'll stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring the Israelites out of it. And he showed his power over the 9 plagues. Okay? We've heard of them, we know them. And Jesus showed his power through the miraculous works that he did. There's some gospel tracts at the back, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, a biography of his life, eyewitness accounts. He did some extraordinary things. Cast out demons, healed the sick, raised the dead, calmed the storm. Who is this man that even the waves, the wind and the waves obey him? The girl who had died, he said, little girl, wake up. And she came back to life. By doing things that only God could do, to show in his supernatural works that he was God, that he had power over everything. And that couldn't be explained by human reasoning. But it's true, it happened, it is in the eyewitnesses. And so the challenge for us, who are we listening to? Pharaoh was rebellious. He didn't listen. His heart got harder. But we're all listening to someone. And there are good people to listen to, authority figures, parents, head teachers, bosses, the government, people who have influence and power for good reasons. We listen to them, and that's a good thing to do. There's popular culture that we listen to. But a lot of the time, it's ourselves, isn't it? It's our hearts, where we listen to our feelings and emotions. It's our minds, when we think what is most rational and plausible. It's our consciences. What doesn't make us feel guilty? It's perhaps peer pressure. Oh, everybody else is doing it, so it must be right, and so I'm going to listen to them and do it. Or it's secular culture. There's no such thing as objective truth. Your truth is yours, and so listen to that and do that. Who or what are we listening to? And I say this because as Christians, if God has power over everything, if Jesus has power over everything, then his word is the one thing, first and foremost, that we should listen to and ought to listen to and prioritise. That is the voice we should listen. And if you're not a Christian, the way to discover who Jesus is, what he really did, is to take an eyewitness account, to have a read of it, to look and discover and explore and ask questions. Pick one, take one home. They're free, read it. And if you've got a question, come and chat with me after the service. Third truth, God rescues his people. See, in the Exodus narrative, the 10th plague, the worst of them all, was the death of the firstborn Egyptians. And that's what it took to let Pharaoh let the Israelites go. But it was universal. It was, the angel of death was going to pass over, and the Israelites were still there. So you could be thinking, well, okay, what about them? What about the Israelites' firstborn? But we heard, didn't we? They took a perfect lamb, a substitute, and they brushed his blood, their blood, over the doorposts so that the angel of death could pass over. And they had to trust those instructions. Not only listen, okay, but listen and then act on it. How do you know that someone is trusting? Well, it's not only when they listen and think, yeah, okay, yeah, that's great, FYI, interesting, but they acted on it. They trusted. They did exactly what they were told. And that points us to the heart of the Christian message, something even bigger. See, just as the pure male lamb died in the place of the Israelite firstborn, as the angel passed over, as the Passover sacrifice, in the same way, Jesus, and it's the heart of the Christian message, is the far greater, unblemished, perfectly righteous Lamb of God. He was severely punished in our place as our sacrificial substitute. His blood shed on the cross, judged by God in our place that we could be free. Rescued from sin and death and the punishment we deserve. And so the challenge for us, who are we trusting in? And if you're here and not a Christian, that's what Christianity is all about. I don't know what you think about Christianity, but it's not trying to be good or trying hard enough to be good, to try and earn something of self-worth or be something right before God, because we never can be. It's primarily about putting your wholehearted and complete trust in Jesus and his works on the cross. And Christians here, we know this truth up here, don't we? And some of us here even teach it. The challenge to our hearts is this: are we trusting this truth completely for ourselves? Or is it sort of, okay, yeah, 80%, but then 20% I'm gonna get my my sort of worth and my identity from actually what I can bring to the table and what I can do and what I can earn, so that I feel better about myself, that I'm somehow good enough and right enough, and perhaps even better than this person or that person. Who is our trust in? Is it in ourselves and what we bring, or is it completely in what Jesus did as the sacrificial lamb? And are we thankful as we think about what he did and think, praise you and thank you? Does that give us a deep-seated peace? Does that help us to sleep at night? Does that give us an overflowing joy as we serve him and one another? And then fourthly and lastly, to finish, God keeps his promises. Pharaoh finally let God's people go. But very quickly, we heard, he changed his mind. Exodus 14. What have I done? I've let the Israelites go. I've lost their services. And what did he do? Took 600 chariots and pursued them. And so picture the scene. It's like a Hollywood movie, isn't it? Climaxing towards the end. You've got the Egyptians, they're chasing them. The Israelites are there, and the Red Sea is in front. They're between a rock and a hard place. What are they going to do? It's no doubt, as you read the narrative, you see, what? You brought us out here, Moses? To die in the wilderness? We were better back in Egypt. Even though they knew up here, yes, God cared for us. He's got power over everything. He's rescued us, because here's where the rubber hit the road. They were thinking, is he going to deliver on his promise? Is he going to follow through? But God was with them. He led them all the way. Pillar of cloud by day, pillar of fire by night. And what did he say to Moses, his servant? Hold your staff out. The Red Sea parted. And just like the Isle here, they were able to walk through. They followed Moses to safety on their journey to the promised land. And so Just as the Red Sea was the barrier that was stopping Israel from passing, so death is the barrier for us. And just as the Red Sea parted and the Israelites followed through, so in the same way, the resurrection of Jesus means that Christians, we can be certain that will pass through from death to life. Question as we finish, who are you following? We live in a culture today that is really cynical, really skeptical of leaders. And what makes it really hard to follow is when someone isn't true to their word. They say something and do another, or they overpromise and underdeliver, and you just think, I'm done with it. I'm going to be let down. And so, that's it. But we're all following someone or something. And the most cynical of us, well, we'll be following ourselves because we'll think, well, I know what is best. And if we're being true to ourselves and true to our hearts, we know that even we let ourselves down in the promises that we make. But if there's one being that you should follow, it's God, because he always keeps his promises. He won't let you down. If there's one person you should follow, it's Jesus, because he kept all of his promises. And how do we know? Well, it was the resurrection that ultimately, which we'll be looking at over Easter, that we know. That yes, everything he said he would do, he did. And he came back to life. If you're not a Christian, I'm hoping that something of what you've heard this afternoon has struck a chord with you, ignited a curiosity. There's been some compelling aspect. And if you're thinking you'd like to know more and what next, there are a number of ways you can do this. We've got 3 guest services in March here in the library, looking at big themes of justice, belonging and hope, with Q&As and so on. It'd be really relaxed. Why not come to one of those? Or perhaps you can come to one of our Easter services if you'd like to. And you'll see there's some of these, if you're visiting for the first time. If you'd like to know more about the church or any of the children's and youth activities or other things that we do, or even a Hope Explored Inquirers course, please do fill them out, hand them in to myself or a member of staff, and we'll be in touch.